First contact with the impossible. The observation deck of the galactic survey vessel Stellar Seeker fell silent as Chief Researcher Xerax stared at the readings before her. Her iridescent scales flickered with disbelief as she ran the scans for the fourth time. The results remained unchanged. "This cannot be correct," she whispered, her translator converting her melodic native tongue into standard galactic common. Her assistant, Vecta, a being of pure energy contained within an advanced environmental suit, hovered closer to examine the data. The planet below them defied every established principle of xenobiology. The atmosphere was a volatile mix of corrosive gases with oxygen levels that should have caused spontaneous combustion. The gravity was nearly twice the galactic habitability standard. Massive oceanic bodies of dihydrogen monoxide covered 70% of the surface, a compound so reactive it was classified as a universal solvent. Yet there, on the main view screen, was undeniable evidence of not just life, but advanced civilization. "Run a full-spectrum analysis of their communications," Xerax ordered, her professional detachment warring with growing excitement. The results scrolled across her neural interface: radio waves, digital signals, quantum transmissions, all indicating a technological society. "Classification?" Vectav inquired, their energy form pulsing with curiosity. Xerax's scales shifted to a deep blue of concern. "According to all established metrics, Class 13. The observation deck erupted in gasps and murmurs. In the 5,000 years since the Galactic Survey had begun cataloging habitable worlds, nothing above Class 10 had ever produced intelligent life. Most species evolved in environments classified between Class 3 and Class 7. "We need to contact the Council," Vecta suggested, their usual steady glow flickering with uncertainty. Before Xerax could respond, a new alert flashed across their sensors. The primitive chemical rockets they had detected leaving the planet's atmosphere were being replaced by something far more sophisticated: sleek vessels utilizing gravitational manipulation technology. Technology that shouldn't have been possible in such hostile conditions were rising from the surface. "They've detected us," Xerax announced, watching as the Earth vessels adjusted their trajectory with impossible precision. "And they're coming to say hello." The next few hours were a blur of activity as the Stellar Seeker's crew prepared for first contact. Standard protocols seemed woefully inadequate for this situation. How did one prepare to meet beings who had evolved in conditions that would kill most species instantly? The answer came in a transmission from the approaching Earth vessels, broadcast in perfect galactic common. "Greetings, visitors. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We've been waiting a long time to meet our galactic neighbors. Permission to dock." The casual confidence in that transmission sent ripples of astonishment through the Stellar Seeker's crew. These beings hadn't just survived in their death world. They had thrived enough to master interstellar communications and translation. As the Earth vessel smoothly docked with their ship, Xerax and her team rushed to prepare the containment chamber, standard procedure for meeting species from extreme environments. But when the airlock cycled open, Captain Chen and her crew stepped out without environmental suits, wearing only what appeared to be decorative fabric coverings. "Sorry if we startled you," Chen said with what Xerax would later learn was called a smile. "We've been monitoring deep space for centuries, improving our technology, waiting for the right moment to make contact. When we detected your ship, we figured that moment had arrived." Xerax's scientific mind was racing. The humans, as they called themselves, were breathing the ship's standard atmosphere without difficulty. Their body temperature was maintaining homeostasis despite conditions that should have been too cold for a Class 13 species. They moved with ease in the ship's lighter gravity, showing perfect adaptation. "Impossible," she whispered, forgetting her translator was active. Captain Chen's smile widened. "You'll find that's a word humans don't particularly believe in. We prefer to think of the impossible as simply something we haven't figured out how to do yet." As the initial meetings progressed, Xerax began to understand that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't just surviving on their death world. It was turning those very challenges into advantages. Their adaptability, their drive to explore and understand, their technological innovations, all were forged in the crucible of Earth's extreme conditions. The humans shared their history freely. Stories of climbing the highest mountains, diving to oceanic depths that would crush most beings, venturing into the vacuum of space, using technology they had developed themselves. Each tale seemed more incredible than the last. But how? Vecta finally asked, their energy form pulsing with intense curiosity. How did you not just survive, but achieve all this? Because of Earth, not despite it, Captain Chen explained. Every challenge our world presented became an opportunity to grow stronger, to think differently, to push beyond what we thought was possible. We learned early that the universe doesn't care about what should or shouldn't be possible. It only cares about what is. As Xyrax prepared her initial report for the Galactic Council, she realized that the discovery of humanity wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was going to change everything. The species that had evolved on the impossible world were about to show the galaxy that impossible was just another word for opportunity. And this was only the beginning. The adaptable species. The news of humanity's discovery spread through the galaxy like a quantum cascade. Within weeks, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity, representatives from thousands of worlds gathering to discuss the implications of finding intelligent life on a Class 13 world. Admiral Kenner Wright stood before the assembled delegates, her weathered face displaying the calm confidence that had become humanity's trademark. Behind her, holographic displays showed the latest crisis, a stellar anomaly that was threatening multiple inhabited systems. The radiation from these solar flares is unlike anything we've encountered, explained Council Speaker Xalver, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of distress. Our shielding technology cannot withstand it. 3 colonies have already been evacuated. Wright studied the data with practiced ease. On Earth, humans had dealt with radiation since their earliest days of atomic research. What terrified other species was, to them, a manageable challenge. We've developed methods to handle radiation far more intense than this, Wright said, pulling up specifications for human radiation shielding technology. Our ships can get close enough to study the phenomenon directly. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. The idea of deliberately approaching the deadly stellar anomaly seemed suicidal to most species, but Wright wasn't finished. Moreover, she continued, we've detected a pattern in these solar flares. They're not random. They're being caused by something. Something artificial. Dr. Elena Santos, Earth's leading genophysicist, stepped forward to explain. Her dark eyes sparkled with the excitement of discovery as she highlighted specific energy signatures in the data. These energy patterns show signs of quantum manipulation, she explained. Someone or something is experimenting with stellar engineering, but their control systems are malfunctioning. We need to get close enough to understand what's happening and stop it. The Council's Scientific Advisory Board, led by Xyrax, who had been promoted after her first contact with humanity, reviewed the human analysis. Their conclusions were unanimous. The humans were right. But how can you survive such conditions? Asked Vecta, who had also joined the Council's scientific division. The radiation levels alone. We've been living with radiation since we split the atom, Santos explained. Our bodies can handle exposure levels that would be lethal to most species, and our technology can protect us from the rest. What you see as an insurmountable barrier, we see as Tuesday. The Council approved the human expedition with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Within days, the Earth ship Prometheus deployed to the affected region. Its crew, led by Captain Marcus Chen, Sarah Chen's brother, had trained for exactly this type of mission. The Prometheus approached the first affected star system, its hybrid shields, combining human radiation protection with galactic energy dissipation technology. Holding steady, the ship's sensors, enhanced by human ingenuity, began collecting data that had been impossible to gather before. "We're detecting quantum manipulation devices in orbit around the star," reported Dr. Santos from her station on the bridge. "They're ancient, possibly predating known galactic civilization. Some kind of automated stellar engineering system that's fallen into disrepair." As they worked to understand and neutralize the malfunctioning devices, the crew of the Prometheus demonstrated another uniquely human trait: the ability to think creatively under pressure. When conventional solutions failed, they improvised, drawing on their species' long history of overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Aisha Patel, the ship's quantum communications officer, noticed something in the device's energy signature that reminded her of Earth's aurora borealis. These aren't just engineering devices, she realized. They're communication nodes. The radiation isn't a malfunction, it's a message. Working with the ship's AI, Patel decoded the ancient quantum signals. The devices were part of a vast network designed to study stellar evolution, left behind by a long-vanished species. The network had activated automatically after detecting changes in local star patterns, attempting to alert someone who was no longer there to listen. The solution, once they understood the problem, was elegantly simple. The human crew reprogrammed the ancient devices, updating their protocols to modern standards and establishing new safety parameters. The deadly solar flares ceased, replaced by carefully controlled energy pulses that could be studied safely. When the Prometheus returned to Council space, they'd brought more than just a solution to the immediate crisis. The data they'd gathered from the ancient stellar network represented the greatest scientific discovery since the founding of the Galactic Council. "This is why Earth made us the way we are," Captain Chen explained to the Council. "Our world never gave us the luxury of avoiding challenges. It forced us to adapt, to think differently, to find ways to survive and thrive in conditions that should have killed us. Now we can use those same abilities to help the entire galaxy." The Council sessions that followed marked a turning point in galactic history. Humanity's designation changed from anomalous species to essential advisors. Their perspective, shaped by evolving on a world that should have been impossible to inhabit, offered solutions to problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. But as humans began sharing their knowledge and technology more widely, some among the Council began to wonder what other impossible challenges might lurk in the galaxy's future, and would humanity's unique adaptations be enough to face them? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. Warriors from the Crucible. The emergency alert cut through the usual calm of the Council space station. Admiral Wright burst into the command center, where holographic displays showed an unfolding nightmare. An unknown force was systematically destroying defensive installations across 3 sectors, using weapons that bypassed every known shield configuration. "Show me the attack pattern," Wright demanded, her eyes scanning the tactical display. Around her, Council military advisors from a dozen species struggled to make sense of the unprecedented assault. "They emerged from uncharted space," reported General Vexnar, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. "Our standard defense protocols are useless. They've adapted to every countermeasure we've deployed." Wright studied the enemy's movements with the practiced eye of someone who had grown up studying military history on Earth. While other species had evolved in relatively peaceful environments, humans had been forged by millions of years of constant competition and conflict. "They're not just adapting," she realized. "They're learning. Each attack builds on the information gained from the previous one. This isn't random. It's systematic elimination of our defensive capabilities." The revelation sent shockwaves through the command center. The idea of an enemy that could learn and adapt so quickly was terrifying to most galactic species, whose military doctrine relied on predetermined responses to known threats. "How can we fight an enemy that learns from every encounter?" asked Commander Xerox, who had been seconded to the Military Advisory Board. Wright's response was pure human: by learning faster than they do. Within hours, Earth's diplomatic channels were buzzing with activity. The humans had been preparing for something like this since their first contact with galactic civilization. They understood something that other species had never needed to learn: the art of asymmetric warfare. The Earth Defense Force mobilized with stunning speed. Ships that had been designed using principles learned from billions of years of Earth's evolutionary arms race deployed across the threatened sectors. Their crews, trained to think like the predators they had evolved from, began studying the enemy's patterns. Captain Maya Rodriguez, commanding the advanced scout ship Raider, was the first to spot the crucial weakness. "They're too perfect," she reported to Admiral Wright. "Their responses follow optimal tactical patterns every time. No biological species fights that way." The pieces fell into place. The attacking force wasn't biological at all. It was artificial. An automated defense system, like the stellar engineering network they'd encountered before, but designed for warfare instead of scientific research. "They're running on quantum algorithms," explained Dr. Santos, who had been called in to analyze the attack patterns. "Advanced, but ultimately predictable if you know how to look for the underlying logic." This was where humanity's unique evolution proved invaluable. While other species had developed linear, logical approaches to warfare, humans had evolved to think creatively, to use deception, to understand that the most direct approach wasn't always the most effective. Admiral Wright's strategy was quintessentially human. Instead of trying to outfight the automated attackers, they would outsmart them. The Earth Defense Force began deploying ships in seemingly random patterns, making mistakes that were actually carefully planned traps. The automated enemy, programmed to exploit optimal tactical opportunities, couldn't resist the bait. Ship after ship fell into carefully prepared ambushes, their perfect tactical responses becoming perfectly predictable weaknesses. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Wei Chen, a quantum communications specialist, and cousin to both Sarah and Marcus Chen, noticed something familiar in the enemy's command protocols. "These command signatures," he reported, "they're similar to the stellar engineering network we found. This isn't just another ancient automation. It's part of the same system." The stellar network wasn't just for research. It was part of a larger defensive grid. The discovery changed everything. Using the knowledge they'd gained from reprogramming the stellar network, the human fleet was able to isolate and modify the enemy's command protocols. The automated attackers, their original programming restored, stood down. In the aftermath, as the Council reviewed the incident, many species struggled to understand how humans had prevailed where their own military forces had failed. "Your tactics defied all logical analysis," General Vexnar admitted. "The risks you took should have led to disaster." "That's because you're thinking like a species that evolved in safety," Admiral Wright explained. "Earth never gave us that luxury. Every advancement our species made, from stone tools to quantum drives, came from learning to outsmart something that was trying to kill us. We don't just survive challenges, we learn from them." The council chambers were silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their physical adaptations. It was their mindset. Shaped by a world that had forced them to adapt or die, they had developed a unique ability to turn adversity into advantage. As the emergency session concluded, Speaker Gzalver made an unprecedented announcement. The Council was establishing a new military advisory board, led by human strategists, to help prepare galactic civilization for future threats. But as humans began sharing their defensive doctrines and training methods with other species, a new question arose. Could others learn to think like humans without having evolved in humanity's crucible? The answer would require something that had never been attempted in galactic history: a complete reimagining of how species could learn from each other. The teachers of survival. The Mars training facility stretched across the red planet's Valles Marineris, a complex of domes and underground chambers that represented the galaxy's most ambitious educational experiment. Dr. Elena Santos stood at the observation window, watching as representatives from 30 different species struggled through what humans called basic survival training. "They're adapting faster than expected," noted Captain Sarah Chen, who had transferred from the Earth Defense Force to head the facility's practical training division. The aliens below were learning to move in environmental suits that were deliberately less protective than their usual ones, forcing them to deal with conditions they would have once considered lethal. "It's not just physical adaptation," Santos replied. "They're beginning to think differently. Watch." In the training chamber, a group faced a simulated crisis, a habitat breach in harsh conditions. Traditional galactic protocols would have called for immediate evacuation. Instead, the trainees were working together to repair the breach while maintaining their position, just as humans had learned to do during their early Mars colonization efforts. Implementation of human survival protocols at 73% efficiency, reported the facility's eye, a 15% improvement over last cycle. The success of the Mars facility had surprised even its human designers. When the Galactic Council had first proposed the idea of learning human survival techniques, many had doubted whether species that evolved in safer environments could adapt to human methodologies. But humanity's greatest gift wasn't their physical resilience. It was their ability to teach others how to overcome their own limitations. In her research lab, Dr. Maya Patel, the facility's chief xenobiologist, was making another breakthrough. "We've identified the key factors that allow humans to adapt so quickly," she explained to a group of council scientists. "More importantly, we've found ways to temporarily grant similar capabilities to other species." The treatment she had developed, dubbed adaptive enhancement, used modified human stem cells to temporarily grant other species some of humanity's remarkable regenerative and adaptive capabilities. It wasn't permanent, but it allowed other species to survive in conditions that would have once been fatal, giving them time to learn and adapt on their own. The real breakthrough, Patel continued, wasn't medical, it was psychological. Once other species realized they could survive in impossible conditions, they started pushing their own boundaries. The evidence of this transformation could be seen throughout council space. Species that had once been confined to narrow environmental parameters were establishing colonies on worlds they would have never considered before. Trade routes were being established through regions of space that had been deemed too hazardous to traverse. But not everyone welcomed these changes. A faction within the council, led by those who had evolved in the most protected environments, argued that this rapid adaptation was dangerous, that species should remain within their natural limitations. The debate came to a head when a crisis struck the Rigel colony cluster. A series of solar flares, more intense than any recorded in galactic history, threatened to wipe out settlements across 12 systems. The Council's conservative faction advocated evacuation, accepting the loss of the colonies. Instead, graduates of the Mars facility volunteered to help. Using their training and temporary adaptive enhancements, they worked alongside human experts to establish protective measures. Not a single colony was lost. "This is what Earth taught us," Sarah Chen explained to the Council afterward. "Every crisis is an opportunity to grow stronger. Every challenge is a chance to prove that impossible is just a word." The success of the Rigel intervention marked a turning point. The Mars facility's waiting list grew longer as more species sought to learn humanity's survival techniques. But the humans had one more surprise in store. "We're not just teaching survival," Dr. Santos announced during a council session. "We're teaching evolution. Every species has the potential to adapt and grow. Earth just showed us one path. Now it's time for each species to find their own." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just sharing techniques and technology. They were sharing a mindset that had taken millions of years of evolution in Earth's harsh conditions to develop. Species that had evolved in safety were learning to embrace challenge and change. In the Mars facility's main hall, a new motto was inscribed in every known galactic language: adapt, overcome, evolve. It was more than just words. It was a promise that the galaxy's future would be shaped not by the conditions species evolved in, but by their willingness to push beyond those conditions. As Dr. Santos watched another group of trainees graduate, she reflected on how far they'd come. Humanity had emerged from their Deathworld not just as survivors, but as teachers, showing the galaxy that the true measure of a species wasn't the world that shaped them, but what they chose to become. The next phase of galactic evolution was beginning, and it would be guided not by the harsh laws of natural selection, but by the conscious choice to become something more than evolution had intended. Legacy of the impossible world. 10 years after humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, Earth had become the unlikeliest of cosmic nexus points. Ships from across the galaxy orbited the once forbidden Deathworld, their crews no longer afraid of its harsh conditions, but eager to learn from them. Admiral Kenner Wright stood in the newly constructed Galactic Exchange Center in Geneva, watching representatives from hundreds of species mingling freely. Some wore modified environmental suits, others used adaptive enhancements, but all moved with a confidence that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. They're discussing an expedition to the galactic core, Dr. Elena Santos reported, joining Wright at the observation window. A joint mission to study the ancient defense network we discovered. 3 years ago, most of these species wouldn't have dreamed of going near that kind of radiation. The change wasn't just in their ability to survive harsh conditions. The galaxy's entire approach to challenges had transformed. Where once they saw barriers, they now saw opportunities. Where they found limits, they looked for ways to transcend them. The Council's requesting an expansion of the Mars facility, Captain Sarah Chen added, her uniform now bearing the insignia of both Earth Defense Force and the Galactic Training Command. They want to establish similar centers on other challenging worlds. They're calling it the Crucible Initiative. The initiative represented everything humanity had hoped to achieve. Each training center would specialize in different extreme conditions, allowing species to gradually push their boundaries while learning from each other's adaptations. But the greatest transformation hadn't been in technology or training. It had been in understanding. The discovery of the ancient defense network had revealed a crucial truth about galactic history. The long-vanished species that had built it hadn't disappeared. They had evolved beyond their original forms, learning to exist in conditions that their descendants now considered impossible. We're not teaching them to be human, Dr. Maya Patil explained during a council session. We're teaching them to recognize their own potential. Every species has the capacity to adapt and grow. Earth's harsh conditions just forced us to realize that sooner than most. The proof of her words could be seen throughout the galaxy. Species that had once been locked in environmental stasis were developing new capabilities. The crystalline beings had learned to modify their structures to withstand extreme conditions. Energy beings were exploring dense matter environments they had once considered impenetrable. In orbit around Earth, the massive research station, Evolution's Forge, had become the galaxy's premier center for studying adaptation and change. Scientists from thousands of worlds worked together, combining humanity's resilience with the unique perspectives of their own species. We've detected signals, Vec Tau announced during an emergency council session. From beyond the galactic barrier, something out there is trying to make contact. In the past, such news would have sparked fear and retreat. Now, representatives from across the galaxy volunteered for the first expedition beyond their known space. The fleet that assembled combined technology and crews from hundreds of worlds, each contributing their unique strengths to the mission. Admiral Wright stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching as ships from once timid species formed up alongside Earth vessels, ready to face the unknown together. This is humanity's true legacy, she reflected. Not just surviving the impossible, but showing others they can do the same. As the fleet prepared to depart, Dr. Santos shared one final discovery. The ancient defense network hadn't been built to protect against external threats. It had been created to preserve information about evolution and adaptation, waiting for species that were ready to take the next step. We're not just exploring space, she explained to the crew. We're exploring the boundaries of what life can become. Earth taught us that the universe doesn't care about limitations. It cares about possibilities. The Unity led the fleet toward the galactic barrier, carrying with it the combined hopes and dreams of a transformed civilization. In the ship's database, a simple message was encoded in every known language. From Earth, the world that taught us to survive. We learned our greatest lesson. The impossible is not a destination. It's a starting point. Together, we journey beyond. As the ships vanished into the unknown, the galaxy they left behind was forever changed. The Class 13 Deathworld that had once been feared had become a beacon of hope, teaching all species that their greatest limitations were the ones they placed on themselves. In the council chambers, a new classification system was finally adopted. Worlds were no longer rated by their hostility to life, but by their potential to inspire adaptation and growth. And at the top of that list, marked not with a number but with a symbol meaning crucible of change, was Earth, the world that had shown the galaxy how to transform its limitations into strengths. The impossible world had delivered its final lesson. In a universe of endless possibilities, the only true death world was one where life had stopped trying to become more than it was.